Hello, everybody out there in radio land. Y'all listening to Media Cyphers only on 89.1 WIDR or online at widerfm.org. This is a weekly program where we come onto your radio dial and we talk about what is going on here in the city of Kalamazoo, the state of Michigan, the so-called United States, and the rest of the world from a working class perspective, generally calling out uh, the establishment media on its BS, all those gross capitalist myths and whatnot. As always, the following thoughts, views, and opinions are not necessarily those of 89.1 WIDR or Western Michigan University, no matter how dope or insightful they may turn out to be. So if you're watching this on YouTube, you might notice I'm wearing a very auspicious shirt. This is from when I went to the DNC 2016. That was the last time it was in person, and it is, of course, going on right now. Now, I do apologize. I was originally planning to be there myself, getting some not only live coverage, interviews on the streets, that kind of thing. Unfortunately, there's some family stuff I had going on. I was unable to go to Chicago. Of course, that means I get to sit here and talk at you for the next couple hours here. I did want to mention our co-host Nora. They are on the ground in Chicago, and we will be talking to them next week about some of their experiences at the so-called Democratic National Convention. We'll be diving deeper into the DNC later on in the show. We're going to start, as we always do, with some local issues and updates. I wanted to start with this story here in Kalamazoo about, well, it's a little bit of an intersection of trying to get a little bit of a social safety net here in the city of Kalamazoo and the way that gets tied up in budgets and bureaucracy. So this is from WWMT News Channel 3. This article, Kalamazoo approves $1.2 million ARPA grant for homelessness, faces MSHDA delays. It's written by Princess Johnny Steverson. It was published yesterday, August 19th. There are new steps happening that could help bring down the homeless population in Kalamazoo. And by the way, not to knock on Stevenson, but like I don't know the way that pay attention to how that's framed. Bring down the homeless population. It's important. It's like what? Well, how about just help the houseless population in Kalamazoo? Anyway, that it goes into a much broader issue of the efforts to invisibilize houseless people that we're seeing across the country. I'm not going to go into that rabbit hole at this second, but I might before I get done talking about this story. Monday night, Kalamazoo City Commissioners agreed to pass a motion to divide and distribute a $1.2 million grant from the American Rescue Plan Act funds. According to initial analysis of the 2024 point-in-time count, a literal count of all individuals experiencing homelessness on a single night in January, 2024 represents the largest increase in individuals considered homeless since 2019. The largest increase can be seen in families with children. The 13% increase is similar to national trends, City Development Manager Sherilyn Parsons said. I do wonder what could be causing all this homelessness. Do you think it has something to do with increased grocery prices and skyrocketing rents? I mean, I know I'm a radical Marxist, but that'd be a far-flung conclusion to reach. But it's an idea. The grant would create vital shelter spaces for families with children. The grant could also benefit 450 families in the area that are on the wait list to get some financial and housing assistance from the Michigan State Housing Development Authority, mainly in part because that help is on hold from the Michigan State Housing Development Authority. The agency said due to budget constraints, it will not release any new vouchers for the foreseeable future. I'm hoping we get this done sooner rather than later because there is an urgency, Commissioner Kiana Decker said. While the MSHDA waitlist remains closed, Parsons said the city and county are working to address the immediate and increasing need for emergency/residential shelter space to prevent families with children from seeking shelter in substandard housing. So, okay, actually, I'll keep going and then I'll talk. I'm gonna give some another. Groceries, rent, gas, everything is sky high, said Monica Best, an Ashtamo resident and mom of three. News Channel 3 spoke with Best outside a Super 8 hotel, which could be seen as the substandard housing the city speaks of. While running a little less than $80 a night, it doesn't meet local building codes. When arriving to the hotel, a number of visible boarded up and broken glass windows can be seen. That's why Ashtamo Charter Township shut it down Sunday, saying it's unfit for human occupancy. Best explains how she'd like to see the city help. Kalamazoo approves $1.2 million ARPA grant for homelessness. And they say, I would love to see a program where they can get back on their feet, teach them about home ownership, teach them how to succeed instead of just grinding their gears and constantly putting their money towards something that's not helping them, she said. There's no more time to wait 5 to 10 years for the affordable housing to be built because it is not attainable for the 0 to 30%. That's where the housing crisis is at, a Kalamazoo City meeting attendee said Monday night. Those people are on the brink of being homeless, desperate because they're about to be evicted. I feel like investing in people's education in the sense of how do I become a good homeowner, but I don't know how that translates in the long run, Best said. The city and county still haven't said exactly how they'll work together to get emergency and residential shelters up and running. But they'll want to act quickly due to the fact shelter numbers increase as winter approaches. Kalamazoo County government did make the following statement regarding the grant. Kalamazoo County government and the city of Kalamazoo are focused on housing outcomes for city and county residents to create deep and lasting change throughout the county. Both the city and the county share in that focus, and together we aim to address critical housing needs identified in the community. By leveraging our resources, we're able to pursue housing options. That's a waste of good PR because that is the most vague chunk of word salad I have seen in a long time. There's no specific solutions outlined. It's all just feels and vibes. Like, oh, we feel like homelessness is bad, and we feel like it would be a good idea to fix it. LOL. So there's two things I really want to point out from this story, and one is it's looking at this on the local level and on a larger federal level. So, on a local level, there's a lot of complicity from people in the city, the way these decisions are made, and the way that these decisions exacerbate gentrification. A lot of times, these affordable housing developments will be farmed out to private developers, many of whom not even in the city. They'll build the bare minimum number of quote unquote affordable units, which usually are indexed to the county. Now, the poverty level in the city of Kalamazoo is higher than at the county level. So you get a skewed number that provides quote unquote affordable units that many people in the city of Kalamazoo can't even still afford, which continues to exacerbate the housing crisis here in the city of Kalamazoo. You've also got this nascent NIMBYism. You see that a lot in coverage from News 3 again. These stories that, paint the houseless in a sour light, paint them as like, vandals, dangerous, etc. And what we see is a city administration and a local media that, for the most part, and I don't want to paint them with a broad brush. There are individual journalists, both at MLive and at some of the TV news crews, who do some good work, letting houseless people and people in housing precarity tell their stories. But in the large part, we get this whole narrative about how houseless people are making things dangerous downtown, and actually crime rates are lower than they've been in a while, uh, while simultaneously not building nearly the amount of affordable housing that is needed or investing in temporary solutions that tend to get hamstrung by bureaucracy and lack of funding, as we're seeing in this story. Now, it's not entirely the city's fault. And on the heels of the Democratic National Convention, I thought this would be worth bringing up. So, something that we talk about a lot, and when we're talking about our general anti-imperialist outlook here on the show, war costs money. war costs are tax money. So recently, the U.S. government approved, sorry, $20 billion with a B, $20 billion in new arms for Israel. This is while they are committing a genocide. This is while Netanyahu has active warrants from the International Criminal Court. This is while the current death toll sits around 40,000, but it's likely far closer to about 200,000 when you factor in things like lack of medicine, like food, etc. Um, let's do a little bit of math here. Okay, so $20 billion. Let's say $20 billion divided by 50. And this is not actually how money would get allocated, but it's useful for this little thought exercise. That's about if you divided $20 billion by 50, that's about $400 million for each state. Now, Kalamazoo has several different let's divide it by the amount of counties in Michigan. And again, you probably would, like, if you actually did this, you would want to divide it up closer, like how many people live there, is it urban, is it rural, etc. So let's take that number, 400 million, and divide it by 83. That's how many counties are in Michigan. So if we took the money that we are currently using to help Israel blow away and genocide civilians in Gaza, if we took that money, that 20 billion, gave that money, split it 50 ways between all the states, and then if Michigan split that money 83 ways between all the counties, Kalamazoo County would net about $4.8 million. $4.8 million to address homelessness. Right now, we're talking about 1.2 million, which is getting hamstrung and is not able to be accessed by the city administration or the nonprofits that work with the housing crisis because they are having budget constraints and all of the vouchers are on hold. This is what we say when, we talk about imperialism has consequences, not just for the victims of empire abroad, but for those of us here. This money should be spent here. This money should be spent here to help solve the housing crisis or any number of issues that working class people face day to day. Instead of this money being invested here in Kalamazoo, it's being used to blow away innocent men, women, and children in the Gaza Strip. Think about that as all of the DNC coverage rolls out over the course of this week. So anyway, that is from WWMT. Kalamazoo approves $1.2 million ARPA grant for homelessness, faces MSHDA delays. We will link to that in the show notes. Our next story, this is about the 2024 election, and it involves somebody who's been a recurrent character in our show's Rogues Gallery, largely because so it's a story about Matt DePerno, and just to bring you up to speed, he ran for attorney general on basically this anti-woke, anti-DEI, and like completely anti-progressive agenda. Most of his points were about reforming the education system, which again is not necessarily an attorney general's responsibility. Using the power of attorney general to sue school districts and stuff for being too woke and all that stuff. We saw this play out, his kind of modus operandi actually play out in Vicksburg, where much like the kind of media-seeking vulture that DePerno is, he went to represent some anti-trans parents down in Vicksburg who were trying to sue the school district for basically respecting a student's right to privacy and respecting their pronouns. They did not disclose that the student wanted to go by a different gender identity in school, ostensibly to their bigoted parents. And DePerno represented those parents in a lawsuit against the Vicksburg school district. Just let you know what this dude's priorities are. And he is unfortunately our own native bridge troll. He lives here in the Kalamazoo Portage area. So I guess it's like, again, we talk about a lot of these reactionary stooges on the national level. It irks me that I mean, he used Kalamazoo's downtown in his attorney general photo, and it's like, I something about that just ground my gears. I'm like, oh god, like, it's like, move somewhere else. I don't know. Anyway, this is a story from Bridge, Michigan. And DePerno is back and he's running for the Supreme Court. And I'm going to go ahead and read from the article here. This is written by Isabella Volmert, originally out of the Associated Press. A Donald Trump ally who faces felony charges of trying to illegally access and tamper with voting machines is seeking the Republican nomination for the highest court in Michigan. An epicenter of efforts to overturn the 2020 election. In June, attorney Matthew DePerno announced his intent to run for the state Supreme Court almost 1 year after he was charged and arraigned. Delegates will vote on nominees Saturday, August 24th at the Michigan GOP party convention for 2 state Supreme Court seats in a battleground state where the court has the potential final say in Michigan election matters. Michigan Supreme Court races are officially nonpartisan, meaning candidates appear on the ballot without party labels, but candidates are nominated at party conventions. Democratic-backed judges currently hold a 4-3 majority. Republican nominees would have to win both seats to take back majority control, while Democrats stand to gain a 5-2 favorability. DePerno rose to prominence for pushing false claims that the 2020 election was stolen from then-President Trump. He unsuccessfully ran for Michigan Attorney General in 2022 and lost a bid to be a GOP state party chair in 2023. DePerno was named as a prime instigator in the voting machine tampering case. 5 vote tabulators were illegally taken from 3 Michigan counties and brought to a hotel room, according to documents released in 2022 by Michigan Attorney General Dana Nessel's office. Investigators found the tabulators were broken into and tests were performed on the equipment. He was charged with undue possession of a voting machine and conspiracy. A state judge has ruled it as a felony, punishable by up to 5 years in prison, to take a machine without a court order or permission directly from the Secretary of State's office. DePerno has denied wrongdoing. He's not due back in court until November 21st after the general election, and no trial date has been set. He also faces a separate complaint from the Michigan Attorney Grievance Commission, threatening his law license over accused attorney misconduct when he represented a former state lawmaker. DePerno, in a phone interview, said both the felony charges and the attorney misconduct allegations are politically motivated, which again is that's part of the whole kind of Trumpist MO. It's like, if I did something wrong, it's political persecution that I, bribed a porn star or whatever. Anyway, DePerno is seeking nomination to run for a partial term seat currently held by Justice Kira Harris Bolden, who was appointed by Democratic Governor Gretchen Whitmer after a Democratic-backed justice announced she was resigning by the end of 2022 with 6 years left on her term. Bolden is seeking the Democratic nomination for the seat she was appointed to in January 2023. She is the first Black woman to sit on the state's highest bench and would be the first elected if successful in November. Republican-backed conservative Justice David Viviano announced in March that he would not seek re-election, opening another seat. The Democratic Party is holding its convention the same day as the GOP, August 24th. And we'll do some coverage of the state conventions coming up next week as well. Campaign finance reports showed an astounding gap between candidates seeking Democratic and Republican nominations and a serious lack of fundraising on DePerno's part. Bolden, seeking the Democratic Party's backing, has raised more than $1.1 million as of August 8th, while DePerno has only raised $136, according to the most recent campaign finance reports. DePerno has focused on shoring up delegate support, not fundraising, and expressed confidence that he can out-fundraise Bolden if nominated for the general election, citing his own name recognition, he said. He is kind of infamous, at least here in the Kalamazoo area. I don't think the other candidates in my race can raise any money in the general election, he said. DePerno's Republican competitors at the party convention include Detroit attorney Alexander Taylor and Circuit Court Judge Patrick O'Grady. Both have outraised DePerno so far by thousands of dollars, according to campaign filings. State Court of Appeals Judge Mark Boonstra and State Representative Andrew Fink are competing for the Republican nomination for Viviano's seat. Boonstra was endorsed by Trump in May. On the Democratic side, University of Michigan Law School professor Kimberly Ann Thomas is seeking nomination for the opening. Michigan's Democratic Party Executive Committee has endorsed Bolden and Thomas, and they face no nominating challengers. Thomas reported raising over $826,000 as of August 8th in recent campaign filings, hundreds of thousands more than Fink and Boonstra. State Supreme Court races have taken on new meaning in light of the U.S. Supreme Court's decision to overturn Roe v. Wade, shifting abortion policy to the states. Millions of dollars were spent in hotly contested races in Wisconsin and Pennsylvania in 2023. Supreme Court races in Ohio and Montana are expected to be heated because of potential rulings on abortion. Michigan is one of only 2 state Supreme Courts in the country that could flip to a conservative majority this cycle, putting abortion access, unions, and workers and our very democracy at risk, said Lavora Barnes, the Michigan Democratic Party chair. Republicans in the state have framed the race as a fight to stop government overreach, while Democrats say it's a fight to preserve reproductive rights. Again, that was a story you can find on Bridge, Michigan, or the Associated Press. That was DePerno, a 2020 election denier, seeks GOP nod for Michigan Supreme Court. That was written by Isabella Volmert, published on August 16th. We're going to take a quick little break. When we come back, well, we're going to start our coverage of the Democratic National Convention, and we are going to start it at the place where Michigan politics and the DNC intersect. We have another story from the AP about Kamala Harris meeting with the mayor of Dearborn, and a story from local ABC affiliate News 13 about activists here in Southwest Michigan going to the DNC. Y'all are listening to Media Cyphers only on 89.1 WIDR or online at widerfm.org. You can also find us on YouTube. It's especially useful if you're hard of hearing. You can kind of follow along with subtitles. We also have the Media Cyphers Kalamazoo podcast. You can find that on most podcasting apps. Keep your dial locked. This is Media Cyphers, your only source for political revolution. Hello, everybody out there in Radio Land. Y'all are listening to Media Cyphers only on 89.1 WIDR or online at widerfm.org. So the next story we're going to talk about, this is another one from the Associated Press by way of Bridge, Michigan. And we're going to start our DNC coverage. Basically, we're going to split this up. Today's episode is going to be a little bit more scholarly. I'm mostly going to be giving some background. I've got some great articles from places like Truth Out, giving some historical context, as well as I'm going to read back some speeches from folks on the ground. I am also going to be, at least next week, for next week's show, I'm going to interview people who are actually going to be there at DNC this week. And we can get some actual interviews and discussion about what went down and the current state of, the current state of capitalism and the Democratic Party and all the other stuff. So, but first, here's some table settings stuff for the events that are going to unfold this week. And this is an article, again, from the Associated Press. Kamala Harris met with Dearborn mayor amid anti-war push by Uncommitted. This is published on August 19th, written by Joey Capoletti. Of the thousands of delegates expected to gather Monday at the Democratic National Convention, just 36 will belong to the uncommitted movement sparked by dissatisfaction with President Joe Biden's handling of the Israel-Hamas war. But that small core has outsized influence. Anger over U.S. backing for Israel's offensive in Gaza could generate unwelcome images for convention organizers, with raucous protests expected outside and potentially inside the Chicago arena, where Harris will accept the nomination Thursday. And I did hear There was a banner drop sometime last night. I can't remember exactly what it said. It's like stop the genocide or stop sending bombs. Something to that effect. And they were apparently shouted down by some of the more centrist people in the arena. It's like we love Joe. Yeah, this show has no love for genocide, Joe. Just to make that clear, if people were not aware. But anyway. Excuse me, top Democrats have spent weeks meeting with uncommitted voters and their allies, including a previously unreported sit down between Vice President Kamala Harris and the mayor of Dearborn, Michigan, in an effort to respond to criticism in key swing states like Michigan, which has a significant Arab American population. Just for anybody who don't know, Dearborn has the largest Arab American population in the U.S. So, and the mayor has been very vocal, extremely vocal about stopping the genocide and been a lot sharper in their rhetoric against the Biden administration than many other Democratic leaders. So, going on, weeks of meetings and calls between pro Palestinian activists and the Harris campaign have yielded progress in some areas, but their core policy demands remain unmet. The activists want Harris to endorse an arms embargo to Israel and a permanent ceasefire. Harris has supported Biden's negotiations for a ceasefire, but rejected an arms embargo. Rima Mohammed, one of Michigan's two uncommitted delegates, said she sees the convention as a chance to share their movement's concerns with the party leadership. It is a way for protesters outside to be able to share their frustration with the party, she said. Questions remain about the leverage uncommitted voters hold now that Biden has stepped aside and Harris has taken his place. Democrats have seen a significant surge in enthusiasm for Harris's campaign, and concerns about voter apathy in key areas, such as Detroit's large black population, appear to have diminished. But Harris and her team have still made communication with Arab American leaders a priority. During a campaign trip to Michigan earlier this month, Harris met with Abdullah Hammoud, the 34-year-old mayor of Dearborn, a Detroit suburb that has the largest number of Arab Americans of any city in the U.S. The meeting was disclosed by a person who was not authorized to discuss it publicly and spoke on condition of anonymity. The person familiar with the meeting did not provide specific details, but said the focus was on Harris's potential policy, if elected, on the Israel-Hamas conflict. Hammoud declined to comment. Vice President Harris supports the deals currently on the table for a permanent ceasefire in Gaza and for the release of hostages, her campaign said in a statement. According to a source familiar with convention planning, two panel discussions will take place during the convention in Chicago. One addressing Arab and Palestinian issues with leaders from the uncommitted movement, and another focused on Jewish American issues, including the rise in anti Semitism and hate speech. Campaign manager Julie Chavez Rodriguez on Thursday held separate one on one meetings with leaders in the Arab American community and uncommitted movement in Metro Detroit. They are listening and we are talking, said Osama Siblani, publisher of the Arab American News, who met with Chavez Rodriguez. But none of us can garner votes in the community without public statements from Harris. She doesn't need us. She can win over votes by saying and doing the right thing. According to Siblani, Chavez Rodriguez agreed that the killing has to stop. In response, Siblani said he pressed how. There is no plan. LaVaro Barnes, the Democratic chair in Michigan, said the party would continue working towards our goal of coming together to defeat Donald Trump and Republicans up and down the ballot. And it said absolutely nothing about what's going on in Gaza, which is, again, that that's that political word salad. It's like, do you support the ceasefire in Gaza? It's like, we feel and have hopes, and we don't like Donald Trump, and blah, 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 that's a coward's way of saying no. I don't know. We're not going to talk about that. So anyway, some on the Democratic Party's left have called for including a moratorium on the use of U.S.-made weapons by Israel in the platform of policy goals that would be approved during next week's convention. Just an update that did not, unfortunately, go through. Yeah, it is what it is. There's still a lot of room between now and the election to push for an arms embargo, but it's not currently on the Democratic Party's platform. Such language isn't included in a draft platform party officials released earlier this summer, and it's unlikely that those close to Harris's campaign would endorse including it. And they have said as much up to this point. The Uncommitted National Movement has also requested a speaking slot at the convention for a doctor who has worked on the front lines in Gaza, along with a leader of the movement. And they've asked for a meeting with Harris to discuss updating the Gaza policy in hopes of stopping the flow of unconditional weapons and bombs to Israel, said Abbas Alawi, another uncommitted delegate from Michigan and one of the founders of the movement. Before a Harris rally just outside Detroit last week, Alawi and Layla Al-Abed, co-founders of the movement, briefly met with the vice president. They requested a formal meeting with Harris and urged her to support an embargo on weapons shipments to Israel. According to them, Harris seemed open to the idea at the meeting. However, shortly after news of the meeting became public, Harris's national security advisor Phil Gordon reaffirmed that she does not support an arms embargo. Alawi mentioned Wednesday that the group has not received any further response from Harris's team or the DNC regarding their requests ahead of the convention. Since then, leaders of the uncommitted movement have met with senior staff from the DNC and the Harris campaign to discuss their requests. I hope she doesn't miss the opportunity to unite the party, said Alawi. I'm going to stop right there, but if you want to read that full article from yourself, you can find that over at Bridge, Michigan. Kamala Harris met with Dearborn mayor amid anti-war push by Uncommitted. That was published on August 19th. Our next story comes to us from ABC's Grand Rapids affiliate, WZZM. They interviewed some folks here in the Southwest Michigan area that are organizing to go protest at the DNC. This article is headlined West Michigan Palestinian Advocacy Groups Travel to Democratic National Convention. Over 200 coalitions, including Palestine Solidarity Grand Rapids, will be marching on the DNC to seek an end to U.S. aid to Israel. This is written by Eric Howard and published on August 16th. The Democrats really have to pay attention to what's happening right now. That's what Palestine Solidarity Grand Rapids Chair Emerson Wolf said as Israel's war against Hamas in Gaza has reportedly claimed the lives of 40,000 Palestinians as well as 329 Israeli soldiers. Israel's war against Hamas in Gaza began on October 7th when Hamas militants broke through an Israeli military blockade surrounding the Gaza Strip. Since then, Israel has led one of the deadliest and most destructive militaristic campaigns in recent history, according to experts. Palestine solidarity groups organized seeking U.S. divestment from the war in the Middle East as well as future funding to Israel, including here in Michigan. We demand change, said Wolf. We demand an end to U.S. aid to Israel. Americans work hard for their money, and in this economy, we simply cannot afford to be subsidizing a genocide with our money. It's unconscionable, it's wrong, and we want to make a stand against that, Wolf said. Israel is being accused of genocide by the United Nations International Court of Justice and will likely not yield an official verdict for years. Israel has, of course, denied these allegations. The U.S. has long been a major contributor of funding to Israel's defense, with $20 billion in weapon sales to Israel approved just as recently as 3 days ago, and an additional $26 billion to Israel and humanitarian relief in Gaza, including a nearly $100 billion federal defense bill signed by Joe Biden in April. The war in the Middle East has long been an issue for the Biden administration as the ceasefire talks between Israel and Hamas have yet to reach a resolution as the threat of a wider war in the Middle East is possible. Harris recently received criticism after she handled protesters in Detroit during a campaign visit where she responded to protesters who interrupted her speech by saying, "You know what? If you want Donald Trump to win, then say it. Otherwise, I'm speaking." And we talked about this a little bit more on last week's show if you want to hear our discussion about that. This sentiment is denounced by Palestine Solidarity Grand Rapids. It's very important that we criticize both parties, said Danny Saleha, the director of communications for Palestine Solidarity Grand Rapids. Both parties through the years have only been serving the interests of the rich. If we look at many of the demands of the coalition, like reproductive rights, the Democrats have had multiple opportunities to codify reproductive rights or immigrant rights too. If anything, this shows that the big divide is between the interests of the wealthy and the interests of working class folks all across the nation that want to see these things get done and want to see their communities be funded. Folks are still maintaining firm on the need to call out the Democratic Party because it doesn't matter that they swap candidates if the policies are the same. And that's what voters want to see. They want to see a change in policy that pivots away from billions of our tax dollars to go from going to war instead of direct funding those needs of our community, kind of like we mentioned in our first story, and towards justice, peace, and equality, Celaya concludes. As the Democratic National Convention approaches, over 200 Palestinian solidarity coalitions are planning to march on the DNC to make their voices heard by the Democratic Party as a whole. At this moment, we see the Democrats as a whole in their complicity in aiding Israel in their genocide against Palestinians, Wolf said. We've been giving them billions of dollars. Be it Harris as the vice president or Harris as the president, we want to pressure the Democratic Party to do the right thing by ending U.S. aid to Israel and for Democrats to support their constituents, Wolf said. The march that Palestine Solidarity Grand Rapids is participating in has many goals and demands, but for Wolf and Celaya, the approach to having their voices heard is as important as the issues they wish to solve. They're opting to host a family friendly march and create a safe environment for people to protest. We're going to have a large amount of people on the ground saying, we demand change. We demand the end to U.S. aid to Israel. We demand union jobs. We demand reproductive rights. We demand protections for immigrants. We demand community control of the police and the end to police crimes, Wolf said. We are very practiced in keeping our community safe. We've been calling this a family friendly march for people of all abilities and all immigration statuses, and we truly mean that. We are working with the city of Chicago to get a permit for not only our march, but the right to convene at Union Park with a stage and restrooms. We have a team of very well trained marshals and medics on the ground who could provide anything that people need. So I'm confident that we will keep people safe, Wolf said. As the group prepares for over 1,000 people coming from West Michigan and beyond to travel to Chicago, both Wolf and Celaya are excited about what the future holds after a demonstration of this size and importance. We will bring people together, we pool our power, and create an environment that allows change to happen and flourish, Wolf said. We're really trying to inspire folks to continue to speak truth to power because we deserve just that. We deserve a better life. We deserve everything that's in that list of demands and much more. Again, that was an article from WZZM 13, the Grand Rapids ABC affiliate. West Michigan Palestinian advocacy groups travel to Democratic National Convention. All right, we're going to take a quick little break. When we come back, we are going to hit on a couple of articles from Truthout. Both talk do some past and present. Going to be talking about some history related to not just 1968 and 1964, and also how the police state is responding to the organized resistance going on in Chicago. Y'all listening to Media Cyphers only on 89.1 WIDR or online at widerfm.org. You can also find us online. You can find us on Facebook, YouTube, and the Media Cyphers Kalamazoo podcast, which you can find on most podcasting apps. Keep your dial locked. We will be right back. This is Media Cyphers, your source for political revolution. Hello, everybody out there in Radio Land. Y'all are listening to Electropop Media Cyphers only on 89.1 WIDR or online at widerfm.org. So next stories, we're sticking on the DNC, and we want to start with some couple interesting articles from Truthout. This first one provides, I think, some key historical context and some lessons that, kind of the organized left should take approaching this very contentious 2024 Democratic National Convention. So this is written by Derek Seidman. It was published yesterday on August 19th. As DNC kicks off, Palestine solidarity activists look to 1964 for inspiration. 60 years ago, the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party forced the Democrats to confront Jim Crow within their own party. As the Democratic National Convention begins, and with Israel's ongoing destruction of Gaza fracturing the party's coalition, the echoes of 1968 are hard to miss. That year, against the backdrop of the Vietnam War, protests erupted outside the DNC in Chicago while tensions flared inside the convention. The nation saw a Democratic Party in disarray. With mass protests occurring over Gaza at this year's DNC, again held in Chicago, the 1968 comparisons are apt. But there's another historical example also worth remembering. This year marks the 60th anniversary of the 1964 DNC in Atlantic City, where famously, the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party, a grassroots party fighting for racial justice, sent a delegation to demand that they, not the all white regular delegation, be seated as Mississippi's true representatives. The MFDP delegates demanded justice today, not tomorrow. They created a spectacle to force the Democratic Party to confront Jim Crow within its own House and support voting rights guaranteed by the Constitution. Scorned by Lyndon Johnson and betrayed by liberal leaders, they suffered a short term defeat. But today, the MFDP effort at the 1964 DNC is considered part of the heroic lore of the civil rights movement, even though it was denounced at the time by the liberal establishment. A big lesson from the history is understanding that in the moment, your protest is not necessarily going to be seen as righteous, said Jeanne Theoharis, a civil rights historian at Brooklyn College. That was true of the civil rights movement, even though that's not the way it's remembered today. This week, 30 delegates representing the nearly 1 million Democratic primary voters across the U.S. who voted uncommitted to protest Israel's genocidal war in Gaza will be at the 2024 DNC in Chicago, where they will be demanding a permanent ceasefire now and an arms embargo against Israel. They are also asking that Tanya Hash Hassan, a pediatric intensive care physician who volunteered in Gaza, and a Palestinian American speaker be allotted speaking time from the main convention stage. They have yet to receive a response. In demanding their voices be heard and their votes represented, uncommitted delegates are explicitly drawing inspiration from the 1964 MFDP. These were not folks who were sitting waiting to be given a voice. June Rose, Rhode Island's uncommitted delegate, told Truth Out. They took it, and that's what we're prepared to do. By the turn of the 20th century, a totalized Jim Crow regime marked by disenfranchisement, racial segregation, debt bondage, and convict labor ruled across the South, backed by white violence and a one-party system ruled by Southern Democrats. Jim Crow may have been brutal and most entrenched in Mississippi. Between 1877 and 1950, at least 581 black men, women, and children were lynched in Mississippi, the highest number of any state. By 1960, around 93% of black Mississippians weren't registered to vote. Mississippi was considered a closed society and very dangerous. Francois Hamlin, a historian of the Mississippi Civil Rights Movement at Brown University, told Truth Out. People died for looking at someone wrong. This is what Mississippi civil rights organizers were up against when they escalated their efforts in the early 1960s, and what the MFDP was trying to change when it went to Atlantic City in 1964. The rise of the MFDP rested on years of tireless grassroots organizing. World War II veterans and black women built local organizing infrastructures in the 1940s and 50s that the young organizers of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee and Congress of Racial Equality plugged into during the 1960s. The Council of Federated Organizations, backed by major civil rights groups, became a coordinating body to support organizing in Mississippi. In 1963, COFO organized a statewide mock freedom vote for governor to highlight their demand for voting rights for black Mississippians. Then, in 1964, they looked to focus national attention on Mississippi with Freedom Summer. Hundreds of northern organizers, many white, flocked to Mississippi to carry out a voter registration drive and run freedom schools across the state to empower and educate. The brutal murder of 3 civil rights activists on June 21st rocked the country, and 2 weeks later, on July 2nd, President Johnson signed the Civil Rights Act. While a milestone, the truth remained. The nation was marked by vast racial injustices, and black people were being beaten and killed for simply trying to register to vote, a right that the 1964 Civil Rights Act did not guarantee. Moreover, black Mississippians were represented by an all-white state Democratic Party bent on preserving Jim Crow. As the August 1964 Democratic National Convention approached, things were at an impasse. The MFDP wasn't a mere party, it was an organizing vehicle. The forging of the 1964 delegation rested on tireless work across the state. The MFDP attempted to register thousands of voters and organized dozens of precinct meetings in rural areas and cities alike. The delegates were teachers, housewives, packing house workers, a toy factory worker, in short, a genuine cross section of the community, noted an observer in Columbus, Mississippi. Hamlin said the participatory democracy of the MFDP was the closest thing that America had to a democratic process, with grassroots organizing helping to educate people so that they're willing to fight for their own rights. The MFDP was organizing a shadow party, as Theo Harris put it, that would go to 1964 DNC and demand to be seated. They, not the illegitimate all-white delegation whose power rested on black disenfranchisement, should be acknowledged as Mississippi's representatives. This would force the Democratic Party on its highest national stage to decide, is it the party of racial equality or the party of Jim Crow? The statewide organizing culminated in an August 6th convention attended by nearly 2,500 people. Ella Baker, the movement's unsung guiding light, gave the keynote address. It was probably as close to a grassroots political convention as the country has ever seen, wrote historian Howard Zinn. Attorney Joseph Rao explained the convention strategy. The MFDP would go to the convention's 108-member Credentials Committee and make their case to be seated as Mississippi's only legitimate delegation. Winning at this stage was unlikely, but there was another path to victory. They needed only 11 votes, that's 10% of the committee, to bring the question to the convention floor. And then, if just 8 state delegations supported it, there would be a roll call vote on seating the MFDP. Bringing the question to the floor had a major strategic advantage. It put the whole Democratic Party on the spot in front of the entire nation and would force it to take a decisive stance on voting rights. The MFDP's 68-member delegation arrived in Atlantic City on August 21st. As historian Barbara Ransby wrote, their strategy could be seen as a calculated political gamble. It would either win a tactical victory, providing Mississippi activists with another tool with which to push for full freedom, or it would expose the limitations of mainstream party politics and strengthen the resolve of those same activists to find creative and truly democratic methods to realize radical social change. Numerous speakers gave testimony to the Credentials Committee, but it was Fannie Lou Hamer who stole the show. Born in 1917, Hamer had grown up dirt poor working on the cotton plantations of the Mississippi Delta. She joined the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee in 1962, fortifying the movement with her hymns and undaunted courage in the face of various threats and police beatings. As she sat before the committee, Hamer described the brutal violence faced just trying to become first-class citizens. If the Freedom Democratic Party is not seated now, I question America, she said. Is this America, the land of the free and the home of the brave? We have to sleep with our telephones off the hooks because of our lives are threatened daily. Excuse me. Because we want to live as decent human beings in America? Lyndon Johnson wanted a smooth coronation, and he's obsessed with thwarting the MFDP challenge. He called on an impromptu press conference to interrupt Hamer's testimony, though millions viewed it on the nightly news. Johnson deployed 30 FBI agents that infiltrated different groups and posed as reporters during the convention. They wiretapped Martin Luther King Jr.'s hotel room and NCC's nearby headquarters. Historian John Dittmer called Johnson's espionage operation a Watergate that worked. Johnson's people floated proposals, including that MFDP delegates could be honored guests and receive 2 floor seats, but most of the MFDP opposed this. They didn't want to take the 2 seats as a compromise, said Hamlin. They saw it as a sellout. Behind the scenes, Johnson's machine was strong-arming members of the Credentials Committee who supported the MFDP to back its compromise. Careers were threatened and rewards were offered. They basically pick off these people one by one, said Thea Harris, with a carrot and a stick. Meanwhile, liberal leaders like the UAW president Walter Reuther and even Rao, who was also a UAW attorney, pushed for compromise, as did civil rights leaders like Bayard Rustin. Among the steadfast MFDP members, a sense of betrayal was setting in. You could cut through the tension, remembered one SNCC member. Soon the MFDP needed for a roll call on the convention floor dipped below 11. The MFDP rank and file remained stalwartly opposed to anything less than being seated as a voting delegation. We didn't come all this way for no 2 seats, Hamer famously remarked. In the end, behind closed doors, the Credentials Committee passed what it viewed as a compromise. The MFDP would have 2 at-large delegates, with the others welcomed as honored guests. Mississippi's regular delegates had to sign a loyalty oath to the party's nominee, and the party pledged to eliminate racial discrimination at future conventions. The compromise was ignored by all sides. While some in the MFDP advocated accepting it, most delegates opposed it. MFDP delegates staged a sit-in on the convention floor to express their anger. "We are here for the people, and the people want to represent themselves," said SNCC's Bob Moses, a key architect behind Freedom Summer and the MFDP. "They don't want symbolic token votes. They want to vote for themselves." Meanwhile, most of the regular all-white delegation simply left. The Mississippi Democrats went on to vote for Barry Goldwater in 1964, Theo Harris pointed out, and this is the beginning of the Deep South migration to the Republican Party. The MFDP remained active after Atlantic City, but the 1964 DNC marked a turning point for the movement. Young organizers who had gone into the convention with high hopes felt crushed. "Certainly a lesson in how far their liberal white supporters will go or not go," said Theo Harris. In response, many organizers turned toward Black Power, popularized by SNCC's Stokely Carmichael, as they would later be named Kwame Ture. After Atlantic City, SNCC organizers helped form an independent Black party, the Lowndes County Freedom Organization in Alabama. "There was a great disillusionment with the federal government," said Hamlin. "People felt they couldn't rely on the federal government. They needed to instead rely on themselves. That was the crux of Black Power." While defeated at the DNC in 1964, the MFDP's efforts bore fruit in the longer run. It put a national spotlight on Black voting rights and racial oppression in Mississippi that no American could look away from. Moreover, there were rules changes at the 1968 DNC, noted Hamlin, and the all-right regulars were unseated. MFDP was a grassroots party driven by organizers and community members with an uncompromising desire for justice. At the 1964 DNC, they demanded their rights even though it caused discomfort and tension for some. Though celebrated today, the MFDP's 1964 DNC campaign, like Malcolm X and Rosa Parks, were roundly vilified in their own day, said Theo Harris. While the movement is now portrayed as the shining star of American democracy, civil rights activists were feared and demonized in their time. And the MFDP were seen as reckless, as too angry, as overplaying their hand, she said. Ultimately, says Hamlin, the story of MFDP shows that movements need to persist in their demands. Local people need to fight for themselves, she said. 60 years later, uncommitted delegates today are drawing inspiration from the sense of justice and determination of the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party. Fannie Lou Hamer and the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party in 1964 were resolute in their approach, no matter what. Their voices were going to be heard. Rose told Truth Out. Rose, who is the chief of staff for the Providence City Council, notes that 29% of voters from Providence, Rhode Island voted uncommitted in the Democratic primary, as did nearly 15% statewide. In Michigan, over 13% of voters were uncommitted, as were 19% in Minnesota and over 29% in Hawaii. We want a seat at the table and would love for that to be formally through DNC programming. We believe that we represent, just as Fannie Lou Hamer and the Freedom Fighters did, a core constituency that is both needed to win the election and that also represents moral clarity and social justice. Like the MFDP, uncommitted delegates will be visible at the convention with daily press conferences, a vigil, and t-shirts and buttons, making their demands for a permanent ceasefire and an arms embargo loud and clear. And like the 1964 DNC, there will be actions taking place outside the convention and in conjunction with efforts on the inside, a dual front of organizing and pressure. On August 18th, the Uncommitted Movement announced that for the first time ever, the DNC will host a panel on Palestinian human rights. Rose calls this a good start, but says their demands for Hash Hassan and a Palestinian American to speak from the convention stage and for policy shifts on a permanent ceasefire now and an arms embargo remain. Whether it's formally from the main stage or not, we are going to do what it takes to make sure that our voices are heard in this moment, said Rose. Disruption is not the aim. The aim is policy change, and we will demand it however we need to. Uncommitted delegates will be working to pull other supporters. There are countless other Harris delegates who believe in a free Palestine and that it's time to end the war, said Rose. While the uncommitted delegates are hoping for major policy concessions, they will also be bearing witness at the DNC to ongoing genocide in Gaza. We're going to make sure that every room in that building, the children who have been killed in the massacre, are not forgotten. The Democrats would like for this convention to be a celebration. To me, this is a moment of mourning and grieving. This is a moment for a new direction on Gaza. This is a moment for change. Again, that article is from Truth Out. It was written by Derek Seidman, published on August 19th. As DNC kicks off, Palestine solidarity activists looked to 1964 for inspiration. We're going to take just a quick little break. We come back. We're going to be talking about more about the 2024 DNC. Also, another article from Truth Out there. Y'all listening to Media Cyphers, your source for political revolution. We are back. Y'all are listening to Media Cyphers only on 89.1 WIDR or online at widerfm.org. This next article comes to us also from Truth Out. Headline is DNC swarms with police as activists march for Palestine and reproductive rights. It's written by Mike Ludwig, published on August 19th. Protests against the Democratic National Convention kicked off Sunday night with hundreds of people marching for Palestinian liberation and reproductive justice under a notably heavy police presence in downtown Chicago. The Bodies Outside of Unjust Laws march showcased the palpable anger greeting Democrats in the streets as they arrive in Chicago for 3 days of celebrations ahead of Vice President Kamala Harris's official nomination for president. The protest was organized by a coalition of Palestine solidarity, LGBTQ, and reproductive rights groups that are frustrated with Democratic Party's failure to halt U.S. support for Israel's war on Gaza and protect abortion rights in the decades before the Supreme Court threw out Roe v. Wade in 2022. Under the U.S.-backed Israeli assault on Gaza, pregnant people and mothers face the constant threat of hunger, disease, and a lack of basic medical care. Meanwhile, people in red states across the U.S. now live without safe, legal access to abortion in the wake of Roe's overturn. Given those dire circumstances, protesters said Democrats would not earn their votes simply because Harris has replaced President Joe Biden at the top of the ticket and brought a shift in tone to the conversation about Palestine. The death toll in Gaza recently topped 40,000 lives as Israel's assault on the densely populated area continues, often forcibly displacing survivors from homes and makeshift shelters over and over again. Medical experts estimate the actual death toll is much higher, with many families still searching for children and loved ones under the rubble of destroyed buildings. Reproductive rights are the ability to make reproductive decisions and live in safe and healthy environments. So, being safe from murder and genocide is obviously pretty connected to making reproductive decisions about our lives, said Anne Rumberger, a spokesperson for the Bodies Outside of Unjust Laws Coalition, in an interview. Nadine Neighbor, a professor at the University of Illinois Chicago and co founder of Mamas, a group of moms organizing against the carceral state, said liberation from state violence is a reproductive rights issue that unites activists across movements against racism and imperialism, both in the U.S. and abroad. Let us not forget that the Democrats, cops, and Israeli soldiers are sharing the technology that they use to evict black mamas and Palestinian mamas while killing their kids, Neighbor told the crowd ahead of the march. Let's call BS on Democrats standing behind the shadow of women and LGBTQ rights while funding police violence and genocide. Sunday's march kicked off a week of expected protests during the convention week, mostly focused on U.S. support to Israel. Another mass march through downtown Chicago is scheduled for Monday after organizers spent weeks wrangling in court with city officials over the route and other logistics, with activists insisting their march be within sight and sound of the convention. Protest organizers complained over the weekend that the city had not allowed for stages, risers, and portable toilets at the main rallying point. It was unclear whether those issues were resolved ahead of Monday's mass march. Additionally, another mass protest is set for Thursday. Anti-genocide protesters are also interrupted a welcoming event for Democrats on Sunday, according to posts on social media. There is a massive police presence in downtown Chicago in anticipation of the protests, and the Chicago Police Department recently updated its policies for making arrests during political actions after coming under fire for violating free speech rights at previous mass demonstrations. A key demand among the protesters is a permanent and lasting ceasefire in Gaza and an embargo on U.S. arms transfers to Israel. Harris has also called for a ceasefire, but negotiations for a ceasefire and hostage swap between Hamas and Israel have dragged on for months. Meanwhile, the Biden administration approved another $20 billion in weapons transfer to the Israeli military. If the U.S. has enough money to fund a genocidal war, then why does the U.S. continue to have the highest maternal death rate of any wealthy nation? This is the question that protesters are demanding Democrats answer during their convention this week. Naber said it's not enough to simply call for a ceasefire in Gaza. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's far right government is trying to destroy Gaza and displace its population, not reach a peace deal. There is no ceasefire without an embargo. It's impossible. Netanyahu has made that very clear, Naber said in an interview. As long as the money keeps coming, as long as the weapons keep coming, that money and those weapons are going to be used to kill Palestinians. There's an article from Truth Out, written by Mike Ludwig. DNC swarms with police as activists march for Palestine and reproductive rights, published on August 19th. We're going to take a real quick break. I literally just need to drink some water. And then we're going to close out our show with a very powerful speech from Amin Abdelhadi, who spoke at one of the protests on August 18th. Y'all listening to Media Cyphers only on 89.1 WIDR or online at widerfm.org. If you can find us on Facebook as well as YouTube and most podcasting apps at the Media Cyphers Kalamazoo podcast. Keep your dial locked. This is Media Cyphers, your source for political revolution.